Welcome to a Monday edition of Anglican Unscripted. This is episode 113. Don't let the 13 fool you. Just because George and I have been trying to record this now for 2 hours doesn't mean we're having any bad luck whatsoever. No. He's now at the library. I'm Kevin Carlson.
And I'm George Conger. And today's August 11th, 2014.
Okay, as you can tell, George is not in his normal studio location. He's at the public library of Vero Beach. If somebody comes to him and goes, shh, you'll know it's because he's in a public library and he's using his deep vibrato voice. Do you still have the voice, George?
I still have the voice.
Okay, so we're going to try and do what we can recording remotely. George, his landlord has decided to re-roof the roof. And we tried recording, but we kept hearing, and they would not pound in sync or rhythm, and George and I just couldn't do it. So George is at the library, I'm at the Anglican TV studios in Connecticut, and here's our show. Monday, we're going to use to talk about a very difficult topic. It's called Christian persecution. Christian persecution has been going on for 2,000 years since day one. If you want to go back and look at a longer standing conflict, you can look at Israel and Palestine. That goes back 15,000 years. And there does not seem to be a ready solution for Christian persecution or the Israeli-Gaza conflict right now. And so, George, I'm going to step back and look at the bigger picture of, as Western Americans' influence and what we've done in wars in the past, what works, what doesn't work, and holy wars and how to visually see this conflict going on in the Middle East from Christian eyes. First of all, America has this yippee-ki-yay mentality because in wars past we have done very well. I will speak of World War II. We were able to change two cultures in one war. We went into Japan, we defeated the emperor, we replaced the worship of the emperor with the worship of the dollar. Well, that may not be so good, but that's what we did. We replaced their military with our military, we rewrote their constitution with our army writing their constitution, and Japan no longer became an enemy, they became a friend. We did that by totally changing their culture to the extent of their polity. We went into Germany. We defeated Hitler. We replaced the German culture with a capitalist culture as well. They became a democracy. You guys remember the Cold War, where Berlin was split in half, and Eastern Europe became communist, and Western Europe remained moderate socialist, moderate capitalist. We still had success by replacing the Western German mentality of killing Jews and killing enemies. We've been able to do that quite successfully because we have left troops on the ground in all these locations, including South Korea. We still, after 40 years, have troops on the ground in Germany, in South Korea, in Japan, and that's just part of joining the Army. You're likely to serve in one of those places. I have a good friend from college who's been stationed out in Germany for 12 years, and she loves it. Gets to see the culture, and there's no conflict. She is a soldier without a war. And that's how America has done things up until about 20 years ago. Kuwait.
Right. If you look, Kevin, if you look in American history, for 45 years we tried to transform the Philippines and the Filipino people from an Asian nation to little Americans. And that meant revamping their educational system, trying to inculcate principles of religious liberty, rule of law, democracy, respect for minority groups. And though the Philippines have had some major hiccups over the course of the last 50, 60 years, their internal culture values those things left by the United States. When we went into Iraq, when we went into Afghanistan, we did not do what we did in Germany or Japan or Korea, or even in South Vietnam in the 1960s. We did not seek to change the culture. We basically tried to say Islam is a religion of peace. All these people need are love and happiness and more guns, and everything's going to be just fine.
In fact, there's an interesting contrast between Bush 1 and Bush 2. Bush 1 had the mentality that there's no way we can change the culture. The Middle East is the Middle East. We don't want to get into a 15,000-year conflict. However, Saddam Hussein had invaded Kuwait. Kuwait cried for help. They got permission from the UN and United Nations, and other countries agreed that we should go in. And so Bush 1 used a great general, what was his name? Schwarzkopf, to take Saddam Hussein and his armies out of Kuwait. Did that very successfully, very quickly, and poof, but he stopped. He did not take out Saddam Hussein because he knew that if you take out a totalitarian in the Middle East, you change the balance of power. You leave a vacuum of leadership. So,
and George Bush 1 was criticized very, very violently for not finishing the job, that we should go in and we should totally remake Iraq in our image. George Bush said, no, the purpose of this war is to inflict a very short, painful smack in the head against Saddam Hussein so he doesn't do it again, not to change Iraq's basic culture and mentality. George Bush 2 and the Obama administration has followed a policy of trying to make little Americans out of the Iraqis, just as if this were the Philippines, yet it has not done anything other than give people cash and guns. There's been no attempt to change the culture of that nation. It's the same thing that we had with Woodrow Wilson in the First World War. All the best intentions of the world, what did it produce?
Nazi.
Adolf Hitler. The Versailles Treaty produced Adolf Hitler.
Yeah.
This Bush administration and the Obama administration have produced ISIS. The worst possible outcome from the best possible intentions, because people have wanted to believe that everybody deep down is the same, that all cultures are equal, and that what we value in America is what they value in Iraq, which is not true.
It's not. People, liberals are freaking out. What on earth is happening in the Middle East? And the freaking up is they don't understand that this period of enlightenment has nothing to do with evil. Evil is still evil. It can be produced, reproduced, and when left in a vacuum or where there is no leadership, it can spread like a virus. And that's what we're seeing now in the Middle East.
And what to me is encouraging, here's the good news. Here's the good news.
Oh, good.
Guess who the first international leader, spokesman, person at the top of the pile to say something actually interesting and important about the fighting in Iraq was, of all people, Justin Welby. Not Barack Obama, not David Cameron, not Francois Hollande, not even the Pope. But Justin Welby put out a statement this past week calling a spade, saying the problem is Islamic extremists and its intolerance of religious minorities, and this has to be checked. I mean, I almost fell out of my chair because, usually I'm used to sort of this namby-pamby stuff that the spin doctors write from Lambeth Palace, like the stuff we had about Gaza.
Sure.
Oh, why can't... it's the Rodney King thing. Why can't we all just get along and love each other?
Sure, it's the all things
if
being
Israel,
equal. Sure.
Yeah, but stop and ask yourself: if Israel wins in Gaza, what's going to happen? Well, we'll have another ceasefire. In 5 years, we'll be fighting again. If Hamas wins in Gaza, what happens? Israel's destroyed.
Yeah.
How do you find equivalence between those 2 points of view?
Yeah.
But this time around, Justin Welby escaped, I think, his handlers and said something absolutely worthwhile and worthy of repeating, that the problem is Islam.
So what is the solution? Well, we have to ask ourselves, what is going on here? Some people say, well, this is a holy war. Well, America does not have the breadth, depth, or resolve to fight a holy war. That would be out of our realm of understanding, because Obama and the current administration and the previous administration did not know how to deal with a holy war, not understanding that radical Islam is a large group of people who want to kill you regardless of what you believe if you don't believe what they believe.
Well, I could remember Condoleezza Rice, who was George Bush's Secretary of State, giving some speech where she said, Islam is a religion of love. Mm-hmm. Well, that was meant for American domestic consumption. But if she really believed that, God is not love in Islam. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not George Conger who's saying that. It's Ibn Khaldun, one of the most prominent the man who gives us Islam today, Khaldun from the 12th century. Islam is submission to God. It's God-loving humanity is totally foreign concept to Islam. Mm-hmm. And what we have are people like, from Condoleezza Rice and George Bush II all the way to the present day, thinking that what is right and what is wrong, and according to American post-Christian, post-Western mindset, is how the people in Iraq think. That's totally crazy. They don't think like we do. What is good and bad is not the same. Allah is not our God. They're not same gods with different names, but different understandings of how God works. And this inability to grasp the fundamental differences underlying the war. I mean, according to ISIS, these people who are causing all these horrific genocidal things, it's like the Nazis moving through Poland, is like ISIS moving through Nineveh and Mosul right now. They believe that they are doing this for a godly purpose. God says, convert the infidel by sword, because the Quran tells them to. Mm-hmm. And our political leaders, are the talking heads we see on TV, just do not understand or even want to come to grips with the fact that this is a religious conflict.
It is interesting because radical Islam wants to get people into heaven, but they do that through suicide bombing, through killing the infidels. A radical Christian does that, wants to bring as many people into heaven, but he does that in a different way. And
Kevin, I was watching one of these, I think it was PBS or something, and we had this professor get on and said, well, Christianity also has all this violent stuff. Like, look at the Old Testament and compare it to the New Testament. In the Old Testament, the Jews would wipe out a population, but by the time we get to the New Testament, Jesus is love. He wants us to love our neighbors as ourselves. Islam's the same way. We have some passages that talk about living in peace with your neighbor, and other passages talking about fighting your neighbor and converting him to the death. Well, what this talking head forgot to mention was that in Christianity, we have a progression from the God of the Old Testament, who's the same God of the New Testament, but from a violent world to the world that Christ brings us. Mm-hmm. In Islam, that peaceful Islam was at the beginning of the Quran and was superseded by the end of the Quran, which calls for jihad and converting by sword or death. Mm. In other words, Islam is on a trajectory of peace to violence, while Christianity was on a trajectory of violence to peace. Those are some of the basic differences, and our public policy leaders just don't get it.
No, and like I said, America does not know how to fight a holy war. And, if this is a holy war, and I suspect it is, our greatest weapon is to draw our prayer and pull it out of its sheath and start using it. Our greatest weapon is also to help America and encourage America and other Western democracies to defend the people who are being genocide. It's going to be one of those drone bombing things where we're going to have to drone the aggressors here back to the Stone Age. War will be fought much differently in the next 20 years than it was in the last 20 years.
Kevin, I'm going to say something that I think is not spoken enough. My ancestors came to this country a long time ago out of fear for their lives. Mm-hmm. They left England and they went to Holland, and they were dissenters, they were Protestants, they were Puritans, and then the Spanish invaded Holland to re-Catholicize the country. Well, these English Protestants left Holland, came to the United States so they wouldn't be killed in the 30 Years' War. That's why my family wound up in this country 400 years ago. I think, honestly, the only answer for the Iraqi Christians is for them to leave. Mm-hmm. Because unless Islam and that culture changes, they're going to be dead. What happened in Europe in the 30 Years' War 400 years ago is happening today in Iraq and Syria and Lebanon. And I know that's a harsh sounding thing to say, but I believe that's where we are right now.
And there's biblical precedents for fleeing your persecution. If you are persecuted in one town, flee to another. And I think what George is saying is very
And,
correct.
there are a lot of places in upstate New York that's got very cheap houses for rent.
Yeah, Aliquippa is a good place to move if you want some cheap places to rent. But
Ambridge, Pennsylvania,
yeah,
really
sure.
great hospital property buys.
So that there is a solution, and the solution, obviously, this time can't be fought militarily, unless we want to do what we did in the past, and that's leave a large force. America doesn't have that taste for that anymore. Western Europe doesn't have that taste anymore. So if we're not going to change the culture, we have to flee that culture. And I think George's point is well made. If you want safety, leave. Now, we need to encourage our American government, who has no trouble opening the border to South America, to open our borders to Christians overseas. And we need to be praying about that. We have Andrew White. Canon Andrew White is in Iraq, and he's been busy, George.
Andrew White, vicar of Baghdad. I've been a Facebook email friend for about 15 years now, and he has been on the BBC, CNN. We've seen him in the multimedia. He's the chaplain of St. George's Anglican Church in Baghdad. And right now, he is, if you will, the only Westerner giving a from-the-scenes report on the horrific tragedies unfolding right now in northern Iraq. He has a member of his congregation, one of the founding members of the congregation, their 5-year-old son was cut in half by ISIS. They had fled up to their family village in northern Iraq, and ISIS arrived, and they killed the child. This is, as I said, it's like the Nazis moving through Poland. This is, what is going on. And of all people, the Anglicans are the ones actually doing the most good on the ground, bringing aid, not just to Christians or Episcopalians in Iraq, because there are not that many of them, but to all people, Shia, Sunni, Yazidi, Mandeans, Anglicans, Orthodox, Catholics, giving assistance to the people who need it, regardless of their faith. And Andrew White has just been doing yeoman's work right now.
So keep Andrew in your prayers. Keep the Sunnis, the Shias, the Christians. I could go through all the different religions, but keep the men and women and children of the Middle East in your prayers. It's going to get worse before it gets better. I'm sorry to say that. We've left vacuums of leadership. If you look at America, we have a vacuum of leadership, and you can see what that rots. And so George and I will keep you posted. It's right now 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Monday. We got news about 3 hours ago that Baghdad has been completely surrounded by ISIS. And I would not be surprised to see some type of siege on that city in the next week or two. So do keep them in your prayers.